A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, Chapter 50.
Sissy expected her baby late in November. Katie and Evie went to a lot of trouble to avoid discussing it with Sissy. They were certain it would be another stillbirth, and they reasoned that the less said about it, the less Sissy would have to remember afterward. But Sissy did such a revolutionary thing that they had to talk about it. She announced that she was going to have a doctor when the baby came, and that she was going to a hospital. Her mother and sisters were stunned. No Romilly woman had had a doctor at childbirth, ever. It didn't seem right. You called in a midwife or a neighbor woman or your mother, and you got through the business secretively and behind closed doors and kept the men out. Babies were women's business. As for hospitals, everyone knew you went there only to die. Sissy told them they were way behind the times, that midwives were a thing of the past. Besides, she informed them proudly, she had no say in the matter. Her Steve insisted on the doctor and the hospital, and that wasn't all. Sissy was going to have a Jewish doctor. "Why, Sissy, why?" asked her shocked sisters. "Because Jewish doctors are more sympathetic than Christian ones at a time like that." "I've nothing against the Jews," began Katie, but... "Look, just because Dr. Ehrenstein's people look at a star when they pray and our people look at a cross has nothing to do with whether he's a good doctor or not." "But I think you'd want a doctor of your own faith around at a time of..." Katie was going to say death, but checked herself in time. "Birth." "Oh, sugar," said Sissy contemptuously. "Like should stick to like. You don't see Jews calling in Christian doctors," said Evie, thinking that she'd made a telling point. "Why should they?" countered Sissy, "when they and everybody else knows that Jewish doctors are smarter." The birth was the same as all the others. Sissy had her usual easy time made easier by the skill of the doctor. When the baby was delivered, she closed her eyes tightly. She was afraid to look at it. She had been so sure that this one would live. But now that the time had come, she felt in her heart that it wouldn't be so. She opened her eyes finally. The baby was lying on a nearby table. It was still and blue. She turned her head away. Again she thought. Again and again and again. 11 times. "Oh God, why couldn't you let me have one? Just one out of 11. In a few years my time of childbearing will be over. For a woman to die at last, knowing that she has never given life. Oh God, why have you put your curse on me?" Then she heard a word. She heard a word that she had never known. She heard the word oxygen. "Quick, oxygen," she heard the doctor say. She watched him work over her baby. She saw a miracle that transcended the miracles of the saints her mother had told her about. She saw the dead blue change to living white. She saw an apparently lifeless child draw a breath. For the first time, she heard the cry of a child she had borne. Is it alive?" she asked, afraid to believe. "What else?" The doctor shrugged his shoulders eloquently. "You've got as fine a boy as I've ever seen." "You're sure he'll live?" "Why not?" Again the shrug. "Unless you let him fall out a 3-story window." Sissy took his hands and covered them with kisses, and Dr. Ehrenstein was not embarrassed about her emotionalism, the way a Gentile doctor would have been. She named the baby Stephen Aaron. "I've never seen it to fail," said Katie. "Let a childless woman adopt a baby and bang. A year or two later, she's sure to have one of her own. It's as if God recognized her good intentions at last. It's nice that Sissy has 2 to bring up, because it's no good to bring up one child alone." "Little Sissy and Stevie are just 2 years apart," said Francie, "almost like Neely and me." "Yes, they'll be company for each other." Sissy's living son was the great wonder of the family until Uncle Willie Flitman gave them something else to talk about. Willie tried to enlist in the army and was turned down, whereupon he threw up his job with the milk company, came home, announced that he was a failure, and went to bed. He wouldn't get up the next morning or the morning after. He said he was going to stay in bed and never get up as long as he lived. All his life he had lived as a failure, and now he was going to die as a failure, and the sooner the better, he stated. Evie sent for her sisters. Evie, Sissy, Katie, and Francie stood around the big brass bed in which the failure had ensconced himself. Willie took one look at the circle of strong-willed Romilly women and wailed, I'm a failure." He pulled the blanket up over his head. Evie turned her husband over to Sissy, and Francie watched Sissy go to work on him. She put her arms around him and held the futile little fellow to her breast. Sissy convinced him that not all the brave men were in trenches, that many a hero was risking his life daily for his country in a munitions factory. She talked and talked until Willie got so excited about helping to win the war that he jumped out of bed and made Aunt Evie scurry around getting him his pants and shoes. Steve was foreman now at a munitions factory on Morgan Avenue. He got Willie a good-paying job there with time and a half for overtime. It was a tradition in the Romilly family that men keep for themselves any tips or overtime money they earned. With his first check for overtime work, Willie brought himself a bass drum and a pair of cymbals. He spent all of his evenings, when he didn't have to go to work overtime, practicing on the drum and cymbals in the front room. Francie gave him a $1 harmonica for Christmas. He fastened it to his stick and attached the stick to his belt so he could play the harmonica, drums, and cymbals all at once. He was practicing to be a one-man band. And so he sat in the front room evenings. He blew into the harmonica, strummed the guitar, thumped the great drum, and clashed the brass cymbals. And he grieved because he was a failure.